There are really two kinds of companies now in the world. There are the disruptors, and then there are the disrupted. And increasingly, it's really crucial to be able to understand who the disruptors are, and then also the implications of what they're building so that you understand how to fix the disrupted. And the reason why I think that's important is that, too often now we go to the lowest common denominator of this dystopian world where the robots and the cyborgs all have jobs and the rest of us are kind of, trundling from one random task to another, and it doesn't have to be that way. And so for me, what I'm trying to build is an organization that invests in some of these disruptive technologies, but channels them in productive ways, that creates new classes of jobs, that allows people to be trained in those jobs, that allows us to have an economically vibrant fabric, but at the same time learns from those companies that would otherwise be considered part of the disrupted class, and to help them, frankly, be more sustainable.
How's it going?
I would say that it's early days. When I left Facebook in 2011 to start Social Capital, I actually drew myself a 50-year plan. And
50 years.
50 years. I was kind of, I was in my mid-30s at the time, and I said, well, knock on wood, with good health care and good health, I'll be productive into my 80s and 90s, hopefully.
Had you ever drawn yourself like a 15-year plan when you got out of college that took you through 30? Because
to be honest with you,
Facebook didn't exist. No, I don't see how you.
I didn't even have a 15-minute plan, but I had the benefit of the ability to sort of really map out what I wanted to do with my life on my own terms, and that's the first time I'd really ever had that. The way that I grew up, it was not that. I was very much chasing and living very day to day, particularly, frankly. And so I thought I just wanted to be around things that I thought were so secular in nature that when you look back on them decades from now, they would seem obvious. And then I wanted to be around those things. And so when I drew this plan up for myself, I said the first step is building the capability of creating a lot of these disruptive technologies, or identifying them, or being around them. And to me, that was probably going to take the first 15 years of this 50-year plan.
Just to be able to identify them?
Just to get good at it, to become repeatable at it. It's like anything else, right? It's like if you take professional sports, like the people that are the best are the ones that practice at it and divorce the result from the practice and the act. Because the actual product of scoring happens in all kinds of random ways, but the act of purposeful practice and preparation is what gets you to that moment.
You say that like a partial owner of the Garden State Warriors.
Exactly. I do say that way. And
how is that? I mean, is that something that you knew before watching how Steph Curry and others practice, or something, knowledge that has deepened by being up close to that organization?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's very much the latter. It's, people want very crisp, clean narratives to describe really grandiose things that happen in the world, whether it's winning championships or whether it's starting and building great companies. And the actual facts underneath are much more complicated and nuanced. There's all kinds of tension, physical, emotional, mental, that go into creating something excellent. And so, like I said, the first goal was be good at one thing, which is to identify and incubate and nurture disruptive technologies. What I would say is actually, I gave myself a 15-year target, and I think that in the first 7 years, we've come to a place where I have high confidence that we know how to do that. And so now, in many ways, the next chapter starts. And in chapter 2...
Does that mean you did it in twice the time you expected?
In half the time, yeah. I thought it would be like a 15-year thing, and I think, by year 7, I think we have a good handle on how to do that part of the business. And so in many ways now chapter 2 has started, and in chapter 2 what it's about is now being able to take those technologies and apply them constructively to change markets for the better, but at the same time take all the knowledge that you learn from them and apply it to some of the legacy businesses and see if you can't improve those as well. And the reason why that's important is I think like true knowledge will come from understanding both sets of companies. Meaning, sometimes people want to be very dismissive of how things have been done. And in other cases, people want to be very dismissive of new ways of doing things. Mm-hmm. Neither are the way that you have maximal impact and success. So what I mean by that is there are many things that, when I was at Facebook that we did that were pioneering. But frankly, there were many things that we did that were just copies of things that were tried, tested, and true. And so acknowledging the fact that the nuances of doing anything great will rely on both sets of information and knowledge. And so for me, now what I'm trying to do is say, okay, on the one hand, can we build the next great chip for machine learning? Yes. But on the other hand, can we actually help a company that employs hundreds of thousands of people in the world how to leverage that technology to keep those employees fully employed? That's a great challenge. And I think the answer to those questions will allow us to both profit from being at the seat of creating these disruptive technologies, but frankly also making sure that they're allocated in humane and ethical ways.
It sounds like you're saying you've isolated the genetic code, the DNA for disruption, in a sense. And is that what gave you, correct me where I'm oversimplifying, and is that what gave you the confidence to take social capital public, in essence, and say, okay, we can now do this at scale for lots of different types of companies? Yeah,
in many ways, yes. Look, a lot of this, frankly, is a rehash of the things that we did at Facebook. And what my team and I did there, at its very simplest essence, was collect lots of data. We were able to invalidate a lot of lore and anecdote and replace it with fact-based decision-making. Unemotional, nominally, reasonably sounding decisions.
Sounds simple, but Twitter can't seem to do it. And
to your point, it's a very hard thing to do because emotions and ego can be a really destructive force inside of companies, especially when the social capital of an organization is built up on gut-level decision-making. This idea that you went off someplace and you had a vision. People always talk about these visions. People are described as visionaries. And in reality, what the best people, at least that I've seen, that have changed the world have done is just quietly iterated. But that's not, again, an elegant narrative that society likes. Society wants to hear about a pithy antidote or one very precise intuition on something that turned out to be massively right. Sure. So I just think that we're in these situations where, particularly in technology, because so few people really understand it, they want to believe in this idea of divine intervention, and it's just not true. And so a lot of our success at Facebook was about the diligence of working every day. Again, back to the process, the practice, not the outcome. And so when I started this organization, a lot of it was about rebuilding that kind of infrastructure and that capability to have very unemotional, fact-based decision-making. And so how that manifests is that whenever we invest in a company or we have an idea about starting a company, we try to implement tools and systems that allow us to understand what's really happening on the ground, meaning the actual atomic level data that the business is generating while it's trying to do whatever it's trying to do. So for example, my family's riddled with diabetes, and so myself and two other people started a diabetes business 7 years ago that helps large populations manage the disease. And how we think about its success is actually the data from the glucometers themselves. And when you have it, what it allows us to do is realize that you can predict when somebody's about to have a hypo or hyperglycemic event. And with those insights, then you can now have a nurse, a diabetes educator, an endocrinologist, an entire support system within a hospital intervene on behalf of the patient and make sure that they don't suffer from the debilitating effects of diabetes. That wasn't divine intervention. That's just being able to collect ground truth data, being able to apply, in that case, all kinds of interesting machine learning, then being able to take that and productize it and then sell it into an organization who desperately wanted a solution, and just keep chipping away and chipping away and chipping away. And that took 7 years, and that company almost went out of business, but now, it manages 1.2 million patients' lives. And I saw that in a board deck just this past week, and I thought to myself, my dad died of the disease. So I started it in large part in reaction to a helplessness that I felt around my whole family. 11 of my 17 aunts and uncles have it. Amputations, glaucoma, the whole thing. And so, my dad isn't here, but I think to myself, is there a kid like me who has a dad like him who maybe now at the edges is probably closer to living than dying? That feels really great. And how we got to that point was not, going to the top of a mountain and coming up with some, idea that just came to us. It was just chipping away, chipping away, chipping away in an uncelebrated manner. But having the the discipline and the commitment to keep doing it.